tonight's guest is Kelly. Kelly, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks so much for coming on. We appreciate your time. Kelly, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
Well, I live in Eastern Kentucky. I've lived here for about 11 years, and we live on the property my husband grew up on. It's quite active with cryptids and other interesting critters that live here. I'm a grandmother. I have 6 grandchildren who are absolutely wonderful. And I'm an avid outdoors person. I love to go camping, not so much into hiking because, old lady knees don't work so much on the hills anymore, but I absolutely love to be outdoors. I love to hunt, trying to learn how to love to fish, but that's kind of coming along very slowly. But I do spend a lot of time outdoors. Try to be very active and just enjoy life to the fullest between, work and taking care of the house and taking care of the husband who, of course, takes a lot of work, but he's a great guy. So I have a very happy life.
It sure sounds like you do. Sounds like you carved out a great life for yourself. That's great. You've only lived at your current property for about 11 years, but you said your husband actually grew up there. When you started having encounters there, did that seem to surprise him, or did he expect that?
It actually seemed to surprise him. Now, when he was about 16, he was out deer hunting, and he was going up this kind of like a creek area. It's in between 2 hills. The Eastern Kentucky is extremely hilly, and, you either have straight up and down or creek land, not a whole lot of flat land here in Eastern Kentucky. And he spotted a doe who was, over near the creek, and he was trying to get a bead on the doe, good sized deer. And then he noticed that there was something above him to his right, sitting on kind of like a rock outcropping. And he looked at it, and, at the time we didn't know what a Dogman was. And so, he was seeing a werewolf in his mind. And it didn't seem like it even looked at him, didn't seem to take notice of him. And he just kind of backed out of the area and left the deer to the Dogman, I should say, because the Dogman was basically just paying attention to the deer. I guess it was hunting. I don't know. But he had kind of forgotten about that for a long time. He had told me about it, I don't know, shortly after he and I got married. And he just didn't really think a whole lot about it at the time, because that had been the only thing he'd ever really noticed, or, his attention had been called to. But he said it was a very vivid and, kind of incredible experience to see this thing just crouched on this rock watching this deer. At the time, we didn't know what to make of it. He didn't know what to make of it, especially when he was 16. And I don't know that he ever told anybody. I don't think he told his parents or anything. He just was a little more cautious in the woods after that.
Well, I can understand why he would be. Yeah, most people would be pretty cautious after seeing something that looked like a werewolf. Yeah, that would get anyone's attention.
Well, I can tell you as a firsthand witness, it really does.
Oh, of course. Yeah, that goes without saying. What do you think it is about the area where you live that makes it so attractive to Dogmen and Sasquatch, Kelly?
Well, we live in a very rural area, and there's some farmland, and again, tons and tons of trees. And I think that, just the Appalachian region as a whole actually has a lot of interesting things out there that may either be not talked about or yet to be discovered. I know that, my mom would tell me stories of cattywampus that, she saw when she was a child over in West Virginia, which is where I grew up. I've got friends here who talk about seeing Bigfoot, cryptids, Dogmen, in the Pikeville area down where they live. I don't know. I think it's just rural and remote, and the landscape just really suits the animals or wood boogers that live here.
In my opinion, there's just something about Kentucky as a whole where all over the state, almost anywhere you go, there are tons of reports of cryptids being seen. Don't know what it is, but yeah, I think there's definitely something to that. A strip mine isn't too far from your property. Have you seen anything that leads you to believe the Dogmen in your area use it for various purposes?
Well, a couple different tales that I could tell you there. I've not actually been up on the strip mine a whole lot myself. I've been up there a couple times. But there was a story a friend of mine relayed to me that happened probably 30, maybe 40 years ago. It was when he was in high school, and he's about my same age. And friends of his were up in that area near a cemetery that's up on the hill, and they were shooting guns, and they saw something, and they didn't know exactly what it was. So they go over and they saw something. It was like fur in between a forked tree. And so one of the guys goes over and he pokes it, and the thing stood up, and apparently it was a Dogman, and this thing chased them all the way across the strip mine. And if they stopped, it would stop. And I've been telling this guy, about your show. He's listened to your show before, but I keep telling him, I was like, you have got to go on and talk to Vic and talk about the Dogman encounter, because he knows more of the information than I do. I have third-hand information. So I know enough about it to go, well, there's validation that I'm not insane, because I've seen a Dogman, several times here. And it was good validation for me. But, I keep telling him, you really need to go talk to Vic. And he's also got, Bigfoot encounters from the time he was a child. He moved back into his childhood home place. And he's got a really cool picture of a Bigfoot handprint on his window at his house. And he said that was the room he actually grew up in when he was a child. And a Bigfoot would actually come to his window and look in his window. And, when he sent me the handprint, I was like, oh, man. So I am doing everything I can to get him to contact you and talk about his encounters, which are incredible.
Yeah, sounds like it. We're here to talk about Dogman encounters, obviously, but you've had tons of Sasquatch sightings as well around your property, as we've already established. Please tell us about the first time you saw one there.
Well, the first time I was out after dark burning some brush, and I heard a noise, and our neighbor's dogs started barking. But, they bark at raccoons, they bark at deer, they'll bark at anything. And the neighbors have one of those dusk to dawn industrial lights in front of their house. And I thought I saw movement. I thought I saw a human kind of sneaking around their house, and it alerted me. So I saw this again, humanoid figure come to the corner of their house, and then it runs across their yard. And I'm sitting there just in complete and utter shock, because I'm like, that thing is hairy. That's not a person. And it dawns on me, I'm looking at a Sasquatch. Now, it wasn't a huge one, so I would say it was a juvenile, maybe 6 foot tall. And it was backlit with the dusk to dawn light. And so I couldn't completely see what color it was. But, it wasn't threatening or anything like that. It just ran across the yard. It took maybe 3 or 4 steps to get across, this 60-foot yard. And then it goes down over the hill. And then I hear this huge splash into the creek that's right beside our property. And I assumed that it jumped into the creek. But it was just absolutely incredible. And then after that, it was like the floodgates opened, and all of a sudden, I was seeing a Sasquatch. I was hearing tree knocks. And not that same night. It happened over a period of several years. But, tree knocks and howls and grunts and bipedal things walking through the woods. So it just seemed like it kind of opened a door for me in a way. I'm not sure how else to explain that other than it opened a door for me. And maybe it was my belief that they exist because I saw one that opened that door. I can't tell you why I see them. I just see them, and I see a lot of them.
Yeah, that you do. And I don't need to tell you, you know how it is. Once you see one Sasquatch, it seems like that does tend to open up the floodgates.
It did for me, at least.
Yeah, I'd say it did. Before we move on, if you've had a Dogman encounter of your own and would like to speak with me about it, whether in private or on the show, either way is fine, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you. Also, you should know I've got a new Bigfoot show I'm producing. It's called My Bigfoot Sighting, and I put a link for it in the description for tonight's show. You really should check it out. If you listen, you'll see that it's a different kind of Bigfoot show, and I think you'll like it. Alright, now that I've shared that with you, let's get back to the show. Alright, Kelly, please tell us about your encounters now. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
Well, we were talking about the strip mine property up behind our house, and one thing that I didn't mention earlier was years ago, my husband and his ex-girlfriend were driving through that area, and they were coming down the hill from the strip mine area, and they actually had 4 or 5, he doesn't know, of these large black dog-like creatures that actually chased them. There were some on her side of the car. There were some on his side of the car. He said their eyes had this real amber glint to them or glow to them. And they chased them down this hill for probably a good quarter of a mile before they veered off. It's a 1-lane curvy road, so they couldn't go very fast on the road. And these things literally would like run up to the doors, and then they would back off, and then they run up to the doors and they'd back off. And he said it was really creepy. He wasn't scared, but he said it was just a really creepy experience having, these big dogs chasing them. He said they definitely were not domestic dogs or coyotes or anything like that. He's very much a woodsman. He's much more of a woodsman than I am. And he definitely knows the difference between a dog, a coy dog, a domestic dog, whatever. And he said these things were huge, and they just, kept pace with the car. They were probably going 25, 30 miles an hour, and they easily kept pace with the car. He said that he believes that they actually could have outpaced the car, but they wouldn't go in front of the headlights to where he could get a good look at them. So that again ties back into that strip mine area. But there was a whole pack of those. That I probably would have really not been able to get over. Some of my other sightings I've done a little better with, but I don't know if I had seen a pack of them that I would ever want to come back out to this place where we live now ever again. And even when he told me about it, it creeped me out for a while, but, I just put it out of my head. I didn't experience it. So, I just kind of let it go. Then we were coming down that same area, and this was about 4 years ago. And there was one, it was tall and grayish. It was about 2:00 in the morning, and it was tall and kind of gray, and our headlights hit it. And it just kind of stepped out of the tree line up to the edge of the road. Now, this one was really weird. It looked very emaciated, almost like it had mange or something. It was a really weird looking dog man. I think that was the first time I had ever seen one. And it was just like, for just a couple seconds, to the point where I literally convinced myself that it was my imagination, that I hadn't seen anything, that I didn't see it. It wasn't there. And this was before I'd seen a Sasquatch or anything else. And so again, it was one of those things that, I filed in my head and just kind of put away and then forgot about until you and I started talking, and all these memories start coming back to, well, there was the one that you saw that time. And it was like, well, did I see it? Did I not see it? And when you only see them for a second, it's easy to logic them away and convince yourself that you haven't seen one. And I think for, me at the time, it was the healthier choice was, no, that was just my imagination. Because, just the concept of a werewolf, or again, now that I understand that they're dogmen, I would have been, quite terrified to have seen what I saw that night. But over the course of time, and this happened after 2019, I think, was when I saw the first Sasquatch. And it was like I became more aware and more attuned to paying attention to the noises in the woods. And, I'm familiar with bobcat calls and fox calls and the various noises in the woods. I've never been afraid of the woods at night. But there's a weird feeling that you get when a cryptid's around, whether it's a Bigfoot, whether it's a dogman. It's a strange feeling. The air feels heavier and you feel like you're being watched. It's a very odd sensation. So we've been hearing over the past few years, about 4 years now, howls, tree knocks, grunts, even the samurai speak and things of that nature. But it's very obvious when you hear a squatch or a booger make a long howl versus the dogman howls. Now, we do have dogs in the neighborhood, and we have, some border collies, and they like to howl, but it's a totally different sound. These howls that we hear are very deep. They actually, kind of resonate in your chest. You can feel them as much as hear them. And there's been some times that we've heard howls, and it's kind of creepy to go outside after dark. We've put up motion security lights after, the Sasquatch sighting. We put up a lot of motion security lights. And there have been times that we've gone out and these lights have been turned around to actually face our house instead of facing out into the yard or the backyard or the tree line or whatever. And a lot of these lights are anywhere from 7 to 10 feet in the air. we have to get a ladder to actually move them. And you have to basically take a screwdriver and loosen them to actually turn them back around, or, it takes, somebody with my husband's strength to turn them back around. So we have a lot of raccoons and things of that nature. And if they were climbing up and hitting the lights or something, they would not have the strength to actually turn these things completely around 180 degrees. We put out trail cams. That was another thing after my Bigfoot encounter that, you had talked about, was they seemed to not like the trail cams. So we put out some trail cams. And there was one night, we have them set to video so we can capture things more than just pictures. And there was one night, we got a video of the trail camera literally being shaken back and forth and then flipped upside down. It wasn't pulled off the tree that we had it, but it was literally turned upside down. So again, a lot of weird things like that I don't know. Is it a Sasquatch? Is it a Dogman? Just a lot of strange occurrences around our property. But this isn't the only property that we've lived on that we had experiences with dogmen. For a while, we lived in Georgetown, Kentucky, which is just outside of Lexington. And it's an absolutely stunning little town, nice suburbs, nice neighborhoods. And we had a townhouse in that area. And so James had gone out. My husband, James, had gone out to go to work one morning. It was probably about 5:00 in the morning. It was still dark outside. And there was literally a dog man standing right in front of his car. He said this thing was probably 7.5, 8 feet tall, and it stared at him. He stared at it. He has no idea how long that he stood there looking at this thing. And my husband, being the man he is, who is extremely brave with most things in life, just goes over and gets in his car and leaves. Now, I wish he'd come back in and told me that there was something out there, but he didn't. I was still asleep and he didn't want to wake me up. So he just told me about it later. And then we were out the very next day doing some things in the yard, and I looked up because our yard sloped really harsh in the back of the townhouse. It wasn't completely underground. And so I looked up probably, 8, 9, 10 feet in the air where the siding started on the townhouse. And there were scratches that had actually scratched through the siding on the side of our townhouse. Now that creeped me out really, really bad. But again, I didn't see it. And I just kind of, again, filed it away as, okay, we got something around here. But after that, we didn't have any more incidents that we can remember in Georgetown. It was just that one morning and then the scratches on the side of the townhouse. So getting back to our property here, again, we have seen the Sasquatches here, and then we've seen, the dogmen. Now, with dogmen, again, for the longest time, I refer to them as werewolves. The ones that we've seen very much look like the werewolf out of Van Helsing, with the dog legs, the weird elongated hands that, they kind of hold up. They look like raccoon hands. The long snouts, more like a German Shepherd type snout, and then the pointed ears. Very piercing eyes. I think that's the one thing with my encounters that I think have been the most intense, is just how piercing their eyes are. It's like they're looking through you. And with any predator, you kind of have that, where they really are looking at you and studying you. But there is something just beyond terrifying when you look a dog man in the face. And that was the reason that I reached out to you. I've seen snippets and things that I thought were dogmen, but the reason I reached out to you for some help and reassurance and advice was a very specific event that actually happened just a few weeks ago. And again, going back to the fact that it was beyond terrifying, I cannot emphasize that enough. We were preparing to go out of town. We do a medieval recreation thing where, we dress up in medieval clothing and go play war games. And it's a lot of fun. But we were going to, it was probably 3 hours away. And I am I'm very much not a morning person. And so to get up really early in the morning, I normally just stay up all night long because I'm much more active. I do a lot of my work at night. So if I'd have gone to sleep that night, it would have been noon before I got up. So I needed to get something out of my truck, and our outdoor lights, they're battery supplied. We don't have them hardwired in, our outdoor motion sensor lights. And we hadn't changed the batteries for a while. So there wasn't a whole lot of light outside. And so I kept waiting for the sun to come up. And then it got to where I did not have any more time. I had to go get this to be able to prep for our out of town trip. So I grabbed the flashlight that was on the desk beside of me, and I go outside. And of course I grabbed the one flashlight that the batteries were dying in. And so this flashlight was awful and I could barely see with it. I could see enough. It gave me a little bit of light, but this thing normally, you get a good 20 foot worth of light. And I had maybe, 5 feet of light in front of me. And so I go get in my truck, and I had to get like 3 or 4 things, and I'm juggling these things in my hand. And so the flashlight's hanging by my arm by the lanyard, and it's swinging because, I'm moving so much. The flashlight is swinging. And all of a sudden to my left, I see eye shine. Well, given the fact that we have foxes and coyotes and raccoons and deer and different things like this, I wanted to make sure that the eye shine wasn't something that, like a coyote that was going to be a problem. And so I jiggle the stuff around in my hands, and I'm able to get the flashlight off of my left arm, and I pull it up and I shine it up into the woods because our driveway is right up against the tree line. And then it goes for acres and acres and acres, possibly a couple miles worth of nothing but woods behind our house. And what I saw was beyond incredible. My flashlight, maybe 8 feet tops was how far that the flashlight was shining out. So this thing was 5, maybe 8 feet away from me, and it was a Dogman. I saw the pointed ears. That was the first thing. And the eye shine, very amber eyes. And this thing is just staring at me. It was a strange experience because, I'm standing there and I literally am doing the deer in the headlights. I cannot move. I can't drop what's in my hands. Normally if I go outside after dark, I wear a pistol. I didn't have a pistol on me. Even if I did, I probably wouldn't have thought at that point to even think about grabbing it. And it probably would have been the worst thing I could have done, honestly. But I'm looking at this thing and it's staring back at me. And again, 5, maybe 8 feet tops, this thing is away from me. It's up the hill just a tiny bit. So trying to estimate the size of this thing, I'd say maybe 7 feet. And that is a really, really random guess on my part. And I apologize for that. But it turned its head just slightly, and I could see it had this very long snout. And it wasn't a big turn. It wasn't like it was looking away from me. It was like it kept its eyes on me the entire time. But, it turned just enough to where I could see the snout. And then it turned back and looked at me again. And all I could think of is this thing could reach out and just grab me if it wanted me. And I don't know how to express the terror that I felt at that particular moment. I mean, I was literally, I could not move at all. The truck was still unlocked. I could have, jumped in the truck. I could have ran in the house, which probably would have been bad. You never run in front of a predator. So I just stood there and, I had the flashlight shining in its face, and it's just standing there looking at me. And I don't know what to do. And all I could think was, I remember when we were talking about Sasquatches, I could hear your voice in my head going, if it wanted to get you, it would already have been on top of you or whatever. I can't remember exactly what you said because all this memory is kind of flooding back right now. And all I can think about is just how terrified I was at looking at this thing straight in the face. And then it was really strange too, because it made a movement with its head that looked, in my terrified logic brain, it looked like it nodded at me. Now, I don't know that they nod, so I'm not making a speculation of that they nod, but that's what it felt like. Like it was, I don't know, that it was like it wasn't there trying to scare me. It was I just happened to catch it in the flashlight. And if I hadn't, I wouldn't have even known it was there. And so again, my terrified logic brain went to, it nodded at me to let me know everything was okay. And then it turned and just walked off. And about a minute later, I heard the neighbor's dogs just absolutely going crazy barking. So I'm assuming it went over past where the dog kennels are at our neighbor's house. But Vic, I mean, I really can't emphasize enough. I mean, it was beyond terrifying. I don't even know what to say other than I never want to go through that again, ever. So there was another incident where, how we've talked about it, and I've heard stories about, that they like to scare people, and whether it's psychological or a threat or whatever, I don't know. I don't know enough about them to say what it is. But I was going through the hallway one night, and this was a time when we'd been hearing howls and walking through the woods. And I think it was actually shortly after James had seen the one when he was going out to the garbage that night. But there was a tapping on the back window, and it wasn't back door, excuse me. And it wasn't like somebody knocking on the door. It was literally, it sounded like a claw tapping, just a single claw going tap, tap, tap. And it was very rhythmic. And I didn't turn on the light. I didn't look at it. I just kept going in the direction that I was headed. And I was like, if that is a Dogman, I don't want to know. And I don't want to incite it. I don't want to cause any more problem. If it's just tapping, then tap away and go away. It's kind of the what I was thinking at that particular time. But that was extremely creepy. When they mess with you, that's just something, again, ugh. And then shortly after that, James was outside one day, and there was he'd gone out to the porch. And again, this was after dark. It was about 8 p.m. wintertime. And there was one literally standing in the middle of the yard, just looking at him. And he just backed into the house, and he could see, the hawks. He could see it kind of had a short, bushy tail. He said the thing had to have been 8 feet tall, if not taller, just literally standing right in the middle of the yard, just looking up at him. Again, that's one of those things where with, what my experience was with, looking at this thing eye to eye, I don't know how he was able to continue going outside after dark, but again, he really has very little fear of anything. Snakes. He's afraid of snakes, but other than that, he's not a scared type of person. Me, when I was looking at the one if I'd have had any ability to move at all, it would have been a Charmin moment, but I couldn't even have a Charmin moment. I was so terrified when I was looking at the one in the face that night.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty bad when you're too afraid to have a Charmin moment.
Well, I'm a grandmother. It could have been possible, but I know I literally, I just stood there. There was nothing that I could do. I could barely breathe.
Oh, I'm sure. You said the tall gray one that looked emaciated, looked like it had mange. Did it move like it was physically compromised?
It was such a quick sighting. It stepped out of the tree line, and no, it didn't seem like it was having problems moving. It stepped out of the tree line, and then, we passed by it. I was driving that night, so we were getting ready to go around a curve in the road. And so I had to put my eyes back to the road real quick. And then when I looked back, it was gone. So the sighting was just a few seconds, which is why I was able to try to logic a way of, no, this didn't happen. But then after we started seeing them, on the property with, my husband's sightings, and then definitely with what I saw, it makes me believe that, yeah, I saw what I saw. This thing was tall. It was really skinny. Again, it had the dog legs. I didn't notice a tail with that one, but it just, I don't know. It looked like there were not so much patches of hair gone, but maybe it had been rolling in the mud, but the hair was nasty and was matted. And when I had my experience, I went back and started thinking about that experience and trying to ensure that my imagination didn't fill in gaps, which is easy to do whenever you have a scary experience. Your imagination wants to fill in the pieces that you can't remember. So I was very, very cautious with trying to recall what I had seen. I don't know, that the fur just looked matted, which is why I said it kind of had a mange look to it. And this thing, it was really, really skinny, and it didn't have like the big broad shoulders that you would expect or different things like that. It was just, I don't know, it was really bizarre. Definitely not like the worst sighting my husband ever had, which I have not told you about yet. We were leaving one day, and this was in the middle of the afternoon. It was 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, bright sunny day. And I was, again, getting our big puppy Bjorn in our truck and getting him, his harness tied in. And I had my back to the tree line, and James was on the other side of the truck, and he was, looking up the hill. And behind me, maybe 10, 15, maybe 20 feet tops, was a Dogman. He said this thing looked like its head was at least 2 feet across. He said this thing was huge. He'd never seen anything this huge in his entire life. And he said that it was just sitting there, kind of crouched down a little bit or hunkered down. He's not sure. He said it wasn't on all fours, but it was kind of crouched a little bit, like it was hiding behind the bushes. And it was just staring at him, and literally very, very close to me. So he just looked at me. He goes, "Get in the truck. Let's go." And he never rushes me. So it was really weird, but I didn't think anything about it. I didn't feel it. I didn't sense it. When I put Bjorn into the truck, he actually immediately laid down, which is unusual for him. But it had been a couple days since we'd given him his heartworm medication. So, that makes him really nauseous. So I thought, well, maybe he just doesn't feel good because he laid down. He was like he was hiding. That's the label I'm putting on it after the fact, after I found out what happened. He was hiding. So I get in the truck, and we were backing down the driveway. And then James tells me there was a Dogman about 15, 20 feet behind you, just sitting there watching us. And I'm like, why did you not tell me this? That's like beyond creepy. No, I wasn't mad at him, but at the same time, it was just very incredulous to me that he hadn't told me. And he goes, "I made the best decision I could." He said, "I didn't want you to turn around real quick. I didn't want to startle this thing. I didn't want to make any aggressive moves toward it. In my mind, the best thing we could do is get in the truck and leave." And he was right. But me, my curiosity brain was, man, I wanted to see that, because then I hadn't really seen one that I believed that I had saw, because again, I'd seen the gray one before, but I'd logicked away that I hadn't. And I was like, man, I'd really like to see that. And as we were backing down the driveway, I kind of saw a flash of kind of gray, but that was probably my imagination just really wanting to see this Dogman. But he said it was kind of a gray color. It was black, but it kind of had this gray tip to its hair or its fur. So I chalked up what I thought I saw to my imagination because, again, I wanted to see it. But going back now, after I looked the thing in the eye that I did that night a few weeks ago, I'm really glad he didn't tell me. I am really glad I didn't turn around and look at this thing. Yeah, because if I'd have seen two of them back to back like that, about a year apart, but still back to back time wise, it's still too close. I probably would have been saying, let's put the farm up for sale and move.
Yeah, especially considering the fact his head was at least 2 feet across.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like, are you exaggerating that? And he goes, no. He said, I've never seen anything like that. He's been up close to tigers, in the zoos. He's been up close to bears. He goes, I've never seen anything like that at all. He said that thing at least 2 feet across. And I don't know if it was closer than his mind estimated that it was. Maybe it was a lot closer and where it seemed, that much bigger. I don't know. And he's not completely sure either. He estimated the space between me and this Dogman. But, he was also making very quick decisions in his mind about, I need to get her in the truck. I need to get her safe. We need to get out of here. And so, his brain immediately went to protecting me. And so again, he still looked at it enough to get a really good description of it. And then when he was telling me about it, I don't know. I think I shook for about an hour after that. And then I was okay. But thinking back to my experience where I'm looking this thing in the eye a few weeks ago, I'm still shaking right now. And I'm listening to your advice and I'm working through it. But at the same time, it's still making me shake.
Oh, sure it is. Yeah, it's going to take time for you can deal with that in a healthy way. But as long as you practice thinking about that in the right light and the right way, you can deal with this. It is going to take time, though, like I said. Did the one with the giant head ever seem to come back after that night?
He doesn't think so. It's possible that we've seen it and thought it was a Sasquatch because, our Sasquatch here, usually in the fall, are extremely active. And, we see them quite a bit. But we don't think that either one of us has seen that one since. And I don't know. I don't think from his description and from what I saw that was the same one, because the one I saw seemed much smaller than what he described. And I trust him. The man has never lied to me in 20 years, and I completely trust him when he says that this thing was as big as it was. In fact, I don't think I've ever heard him lie to other people, let alone lie to me. And he's a craftsman, a carpenter, a blacksmith, bladesmith. He can look at something and almost get the measurements almost within a quarter of an inch. He's just got an eye for it.
Yeah, if that Dogman ever did come back, being as big as it was, I think you definitely know it.
Yeah, and I'd be putting the farm up for sale. So, just saying.
No, I can't say I blame you. When James saw that Dogman standing in front of his car that morning, did it move when he walked up to get into the car, or did it stay there?
It moved back away from the car. And then, of course, it was dark that morning. And, when he turned the headlights on, started the car and turned the headlights on, this thing was still standing there. And then it just kind of moved back and faded into the darkness.
Ooh, that's creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really creepy. Wow.
And that was the only time we saw anything there other than, of course, the scratches on the siding. And that was very, ugh.
Yeah, that's not going to give you the warm and fuzzies. No denying that.
No, but that thing was close enough to where if it had wanted to hurt him, it would have easily had him.
Oh, sure, with all these encounters. If the Dogman you saw, if it wanted to hurt you or if it wanted to hurt James, that's what would have happened. But that never did happen for one reason and one reason only. It's a rhetorical question, Kelly, but what's the best kind of monster to encounter if you have to encounter a monster? A monster that doesn't want to hurt you.
Yeah, a monster that doesn't want to eat you. So.
Yeah, exactly. That's how it is. That's how it is.
No, I thought you were asking me to contrast and compare. No. Give me Sasquatch any day. Give me a herd of Sasquatch. No more Dogmen.
Yes, not just you that feels that way. Did the Dogman that was feet from you have an expression on his face? If he did, what did that expression tell you?
It wasn't so much an expression. And I've heard stories about them smiling and baring their teeth and doing things. I didn't see any teeth at all. I just saw the snout. I mean, there might have been canines hanging outside of the lips. I don't know. I didn't notice teeth. But it was more the overall feeling that I got. And it was almost like, I don't know, talking in terms of energy, it was almost like it was putting out the energy of, I'm not here to hurt you. I'm not here to bother you. So even though I was terrified, it was almost like there was, I don't know, pheromones or energy or whatever you want to call it, kind of reassuring me that I'm not here to hurt you. So it was really strange to be that terrified and also feeling that I knew that it was going to be absolutely fine. And then when it turned and walked away, again, no expression other than what my brain decided to perceive as a nod. And then it just moved off. So I didn't really see an expression, so to speak. There was no smile. There was no grin. There was none of the stuff that I've heard stories about. I think that if it had smiled and bared its teeth, I probably would have just fainted right then.
You would have fainted, woken up, and then sold the farm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would have been done at that point.
Oh, I'll bet you would have been. When you heard that tapping sound on your back door that night, was James asleep at the time?
No, he was actually sitting, I think, in the living room, but I think he was on his tablet watching some YouTube videos and had his earbuds in because he likes shows that I don't. And so there's times that he will be nice and put his earbuds in and just watch his YouTube channels that he likes to watch and not annoy me with them. So I don't think he heard it. And again, I just kept walking and I didn't call any attention to it. So, but it was really creepy. It is very distinct and very creepy sound. And in my brain, I was trying to go, okay, it was a bug. The lights are on in the house and it was a bug banging against the window. No, it's a very distinct sound. We've got Bjorn as a mastodon. He's about 135, 140 pounds. And when he walks across the floor, his claws or his nails will click on the floor. And that's kind of the sound that I was hearing, was just that claw click kind of thing. It was definitely a claw. There is nothing else. I have tried every way I could think of to logic that out of my head, but no. I wish he had heard it. I really do. And, we've had some smacks to the house. We've had some tapping on windows, but nothing at all like this. This was totally different.
Well, too, if you would have tried to get his attention, more than likely the Dogman, if it was a Dogman, I'm sure it would have stopped tapping anyway.
Probably. It may have run, or it could have even become more aggressive. And that's my big concern is, again, if you're dealing with something that's a predator, you don't do things that actually incite that aggression. And, the best thing is to move on or back away or stand stock still. Or, if it's a black bear, there's ways you deal with it. If it's a grizzly bear, there's totally different ways you deal with it. And I made the best decision in that particular moment of just ignore it and go on. And I apologize for laughing. I do that when I'm nervous. And this is a subject that makes me extremely nervous. And so my laughter isn't anything other than just me and one of my strange coping mechanisms.
No need to apologize. A lot of people do that. So no big deal. Have you ever seen any evidence around your property that gave you the impression that Dogmen there actually interact with Sasquatch there?
Nothing that I've seen, but as far as evidence around the property, I had totally forgot about this. We had a track a few years ago, and it was a very large track. It was probably, I would say, 5 inches long, probably 4 to 5 inches across. It was very, very large. And even my mastodon doesn't have paws that big because, his tracks were on up from that in the mud, and his tracks were not even close. He was a puppy at the time. His tracks were a lot smaller. I had a friend who had a friend that worked for the Wildlife Service, and I can't give any more information than that, but he sent the picture of the track to this guy in the Wildlife Service, and the guy goes, "That is a wolf track. No ands, ifs, or buts. That's a wolf track." And so that was really creepy.
Yeah, especially considering the fact that you don't have any wolves there.
No, they released, I think, red wolves down in the Pikeville area in Kentucky and over in the western part of the state, but we don't have wolves here. And we've never even seen, wild dogs or coy dogs or anything that would have been able to make this size track. And of course, coyotes have tiny little feet, so it definitely wasn't a coyote.
Wonder what it could have been.
Well, my first speculation was it was possibly a small dog man. Because again, after seeing them, we're like, oh, was that a Dogman track? Because again, the guy from the Wildlife Service said it was definitely a wolf.
Yeah, imagine that. Well, it's about time for us to get out of here, Kelly, but before we do you have any closing comments you'd like to share?
A lot of it is thanking you, and I have huge appreciation for you, a huge admiration for what it is that you do. I think that you make a huge difference for people to help them work through their experiences. I know that you've helped me tons. I mean, there is no amount of appreciation I can give you for all the help that you've given me over the past couple of years in coming to terms with things, to be able to work through the anxiety and even the fear, especially with the Dogman situation. I don't know. I've learned a lot from you. I greatly appreciate it. And again, the biggest thing with Sasquatch, Dogman, whatever, they're fascinating subjects, and we need to study them more. And I hope that we can gain more information on exactly what they are and their behaviors and things of that nature, so that we can understand them better and not be afraid and not look at them like they're monsters. And, even though in our brains, we immediately go to monster because, we all grew up on werewolf legends and movies and things of that nature. But I don't think they're monsters. They just are what they are. And we can run into good ones. We can run into aggressive ones. But if they really wanted to hurt us, then we would be having a lot more issues, as the hundreds and hundreds, not thousands of sightings of dogmen or Sasquatch or whatever. A lot of them don't result in any type of harm to the person, to the witness that saw them. And, we need to all hold on to that because, again, they're bigger, they're stronger, they're faster. And if they wanted to hurt us, like that story I was telling you about the coal strips, this thing would chase these kids across the coal strip, and they would stop and it would stop and just crouch down and look at them. It wasn't trying to hurt them. It just wanted to run them off its property. So I'm working through my creepiness of going outside after dark, and I will get through it. For now, I'm a little creeped out, but I'll work through it like I did with getting through my creepiness of understanding, that the Sasquatch wasn't there to hurt me. And then it developed into fascination. But I don't think the Dogman will develop into that level of fascination as the Squatches do.
Well, I'm sure it won't develop into that.
No.
Yeah, two different things altogether. And you really hit the nail on the head in a lot of different ways there. Yeah, I do refer to dogmen as being monsters. I definitely don't see them as being true monsters, only in how they look, not in their behavior. If they were monstrous, then as soon as they had an opportunity to take you out, they would, but they don't do that. Yeah, you might have some deviant ones that do that. The evidence does point towards that, but that's just such a rare occasion where they would actually hurt someone, it would appear. At least the evidence points that way. I just don't see them as being monsters to kind of draw a point to it. But having said all that, I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing the details of all those experiences with us. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me on. I have a rebuttal to your comment, though. I think the first time, Europeans probably ran into elephants, they probably looked at them as monsters because they didn't understand them. They didn't know what an elephant was, and that would have looked like a monster. So it's easy for, the human mind to look at any new species as a monster, and we label it as such. And until we learn about it, they are kind of monsters. But again, like you said, not monstrous, but our minds will label them as monsters until we understand them better.
Oh, of course. Yeah, and again, it's because of how they look. Thanks again so much. Have a great night.